office in January 2021 that elections in Arizona can and should improve, both our legal framework and our administration. I very much believe that still. I will happily work with anyone in Arizona who wants to improve voter registration and early voting, and I'm sure the same is true of the board for election day and tabulation. But these conversations need to focus on real issues. We can spend the next 2 years, as we've spent the last 2, fighting over conspiracy theories promoted on social media by people who know nothing about.
Okay, all right. I've asked you before. Please do not boo, do not cheer. Let's let Recorder Richard speak.
Don't sit here and label people here.
We can.
No. Okay. Again. We need to stop, please. Everyone has the opportunity to say what they want to. We're not going to stop folks when you have your 2 minutes, as long as we don't get into profanity, which I do not anticipate. Let's please be respectful. The world is watching. Let's show people. Yeah, we're getting very close to. I'm getting very close to calling a recess here, and I don't want to do that. All right. So again, please stop. We want to give everyone the opportunity to speak. Recorder Richard.
But that didn't help Arizonans this election, and it won't help the process for 2024. If we spend all of our time on stuff like Splunk logs, fractional voting, and ballot mules, then we won't be addressing the questions that all Arizonans care about, such as how can we speed up the time it takes to process Election Day early ballot drop-offs, or how can we prevent third-party groups from confusing voters by masquerading as a county entity. That's what I want to be working on. This is my first foray into elected politics, and it's been an eye-opener. But if we make some of these real improvements, to our election system over the next 2 years, then it will be a worthwhile endeavor, and it will be something that we'll all be proud of, both elected and Arizona citizens alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Recorder Richard. I want to say thank you to you and your entire team. Excellent presentation for people who were, watching online or here. I think they have a better understanding of how things are done on your side of the house. This election was run extremely well, as you pointed out. It was not run by you on your own, but instead by temporary workers, by permanent workers, your team, political observers from all the parties play an important part in it. And again, your mastery of the election system, I admire greatly. And you are an outstanding leader for us in Maricopa County. And thank you for your presentation. Any comments from my colleagues?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gallardo.
Thank you. I just want to once again echo some of the comments you've made. I appreciate the hard work of all our elections officials across the state of Arizona. They have worked so hard over the last several months to make the 2022 election come forward. I know what it takes. I've been there. I spent many of my early years there in the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, Elections Department. I just know the dedication and work that goes in, and I know quite a few of the folks that are still there. They're my friends. I know them well, and I know the amount of work they put in. They put their whole lives, I say this over again like a broken record, but they put their whole lives to the side to ensure that folks have an opportunity to vote, and they have just done a tremendous job this year and in the past years, and I truly believe that in the future they'll continue to do the work. Mr. Richard, just great job. Thank you so much for the work you've done. I appreciate it so much. You have done a great job, and couldn't be more satisfied with the work. I appreciate the applause. Thank you so much for agreeing with me. Thank you, Mr. Richards, for all the work you do.
Thank you, Supervisor Gallardo. Supervisor Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank Recorder Richard as well. I want to remind everyone that when he took office, with all the challenges in the 2020 election, he had no part in that. But he took the time to learn the professionalism and the integrity of that elections group, who, by the way, has won a lot of national awards for the work that they do. And through that, when he learned the truth and learned the integrity of that group, he stood up for them, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Sellers. Any other comments? All right, thank you again, appreciate it. Okay, so now it is the opportunity for all of you to speak. So this is, if you haven't gotten your speaker slip in by now, we're closing that. And I'm going to be handed the speaker slips here. And we're going to go through these. Again, everyone who speaks will have 2 minutes. We'll ask when you come up. Looks like maybe we have another form out there if we could grab that. Thank you very much. And when folks come up, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call 2 people up at a time, and then we'll just keep it flowing that way. We'll ask you to stand right over here as we go through these. Okay, so our first 2 speakers I'm going to call up are Catherine Sigmund and Louis Herms.
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you all so much. I didn't expect to be the first speaker, but I want to say I am a voter in Tempe, Arizona. I've lived in Arizona for 25 years, and I have happily voted by mail all the times I've been able to. I find it an incredibly convenient and safe way to vote. I appreciate all the elections officials. I appreciate Stephen Richer, who has run an excellent recorder's office here in Maricopa County. I thank all the workers who volunteered, all the professionals who have made sure that our elections are safe and reliable. I've personally been able to watch the signature verification process. It's incredibly impressive. I just wanted to say I appreciate all of the work that you have done to make our elections safe and secure. I appreciate having the freedom and the liberty to vote here in Arizona and in Maricopa County. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And then I will call up as well Joe Oltman and Chris Fernandez. And then Mr. Herms. Thank you for joining us.
Have to hold it down the whole time? No, we're good. We're good. Okay. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And again, if we could ask for folks' addresses as well.
Hello, my name is Louis Herms, and just want to put on record really quick that Bill Gates let the fans of Stephen Richards clap out loud without reprimanding them, so let's just be aware of that going forward. Also, directly from a person in the South, I'm sure they would say to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, bless your heart.
Okay, again, please, no outbursts. Please proceed.
And I just like to, another reminder, please, that you do work for we the people.
Thank you.
And we the people ultimately pay taxes. Therefore, the checks are ultimately cut from we the people. Yeah. I know sometimes when we're sitting up in our crystal castles, that can get lost. So just a friendly reminder. I noticed with Mr. Richards, one of the first things he said is, you cannot register to vote unless you have been verified. So I just like for people to pay attention to some of the things I'm saying indirectly. 460,000 votes were dropped off. Come on. Make sure that's a note. 290,000 votes were dropped off on election day. This is something we need to pay attention to. Did not state, which is hugely important, what time those votes were dropped off, and this is key. These are things we should pay attention to. The 290,000 votes, by the way, this is from Mr. Richards, I'm not saying this myself, said was a massive increase from 2020 and even more from 2018. These are things to pay attention to, folks. Organizing overnight started, is that 15 seconds, is that what that is?
That's correct.
Okay, organizing overnight started verification of said ballots the day after Election Day, didn't even start counting until Thursday after election, up into Sunday through Monday officially.
Your time is up. Thank you very
The
much.
state that Arizona election has been front and center was national news. Pay attention to that too. Why is that? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Oltman?
Hey, tell me when it starts. Does it start when I walk up?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know,
And if you could mention your address as well, we'll put time back on.
okay, Joe Oltman, 8245 North Keith Court, Castle Pines, Colorado. You know, I'm not here to yell at you. I'm the chief election denier. I'm the person he talks about as far as a conspiracy theorist. I'm also a system matter expert when it comes to, subject matter expert when it comes to system architecture. I got involved in this not because I needed money, not because I wanted power, not because I wanted anything to do with elections. I found myself in this place where I started uncovering what was happening in Dominion. I wrote a schematic of Dominion, how you could cheat in the system, sent it out to everyone. I went to the State Department and talked to them on January 6th. You know, you have an obligation, regardless of what side of the political aisle you are, to protect the vote of the people. The voice of the people, it's not stealing an election. It's not putting someone in a position of trust. It's having the ability to steal things such as increase taxes or have ballot measures. There's much more at risk than just the person that you put into a chair. People should have confidence in the system. They should have confidence in fair, free, and transparent elections, but they're not transparent. And if you just use that litmus test, a simple litmus test of whether or not we have transparency, you can't in your hearts see that there's a transparent process that every American can depend on. 48% of the machines going down in Maricopa County is unacceptable. The fact that they were tested before that and there was no problem with it is problematic. The fact that we can gaslight the American people like we did with COVID, like we did with gender fluidity, like we did with all sorts of other things that we started to uncover during the pandemic is just wrong. Some of you, most of you are parents, your grandparents. What do you want to leave this country as in the future? And if it truly is that the American people want to vote for a communist nation, then let them freely vote for it. But make the system transparent, which it is not. And you can't outvote a machine. You just can't.
Thank you for your time. Next, again, no applause, please. Now, if we can invite up Martha Kochi and Denise Babian. So if you can please come up, and Chris Fernandez. Thank you. Again, if you can state your address, please.
Yeah, so my address is 4144 North 3rd Avenue, Apartment 1, Phoenix City, Z 85013.
Thank you.
I just wanted to get up here and, of course, thank all of you for running a safe and secure election. In a county as large as Maricopa County, one of the largest in the nation, of course, things aren't going to go off without a hitch, and I recognize that, but I'm glad to see that all of you and all of the other officials involved made a concerted effort to address any problems that arose and to resolve them. I'm glad that my voice is heard as a voter here in Maricopa County, as well as millions of others. And I'm glad to see that we are still encouraging voters to use all the tools available to them. And myself, I voted early in person. And just thank you so much for running this as well as it could be, given everything that has transpired, not just in this election, but over the past few cycles. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And then if I can call up Dawn Henninger and Lydia Abril, and now we'll have Martha Kochi. And if you can state your address, and then we'll start the time after the speakers stated their address.
Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Kochi. I noticed the first speaker was not asked to state their address, and the form said it was optional, so I'm not going to state my address.
That's your right to do so.
I want to encourage everyone in this room to please remain respectful. Mr. Gates did advise us to not be noisy, so we want everybody to have a chance to speak because this is a very important day. So I just encourage everyone to, I know your emotions are high, but please remain calm. So I was a poll worker on November 8th from 6 a.m. The tabulator machines at my location were not accepting the ballots. We had long lines inside the building, and they were not moving. I also received a text at the same time from my friend who voted in, gotta get it right, Cave Creek, sorry, up north, Cave Creek, and it was the same problem up there. Our troubleshooter was responsible for 4 locations. They were not, the tabulators were not working. And this is a very important election. These should have all been screened ahead of time. They should have been proof that they were working correctly. My husband came to vote at the same location where I was a poll worker later on in the afternoon. He put in his vote in both machines, backwards and forwards, upside down, right side up, over and over again. It would not accept. As a poll worker, I know sometimes the ballot itself is rejected for a reason, such as an overvote, or there's a mark on the ballot that shouldn't be there. His was, it said, see a poll worker. I saw many people putting their ballots in, and it said, see a poll worker. Sometimes I did see overvote. I saw legitimate reasons. But there were many times where there was no explanation. People filled in their bubble correctly. So, also want to say we had 3 ballot-on-demand printers. One of them stopped working for several hours. It was causing logger-jam, backups, people waiting for a place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. And then if we could, did I call up Lydia Abril already? Okay, perfect. So then if we could have Denise, Don Henninger. Yeah, Denise.
Hi, my name is Denise Babian. I live in Phoenix. To Mr. Richer, I have to tell you that your voter rolls are a disaster. I banged on over 6,000 doors. And those, when you pull up the names of who's supposed to be living at the households, there are sometimes 7 or 8 or 9 people listed, and not one of those people are the person I'm talking to at the front door. And that person does not know who any of these people are. That happens, I'd say, at least half of the time I knock on doors and get to talk to people. Same thing happened in 2020. I banged on over 4,000 doors that year, same exact result. Nothing's changed. This is not a crystal clear election, as you say. You thanked all of your workers and all of the 3,000 Arizonans that gave up their time and energy to do this. Did you see the latest Rasmussen poll that came out? It reads, survey of election workers, poll watchers, and volunteer attorneys reveals election chaos in Maricopa County. 84.3% of the people that took this poll say that they have zero confidence. 84% of poll workers in Maricopa have zero confidence in our election process from this year. You're wrong. You don't consult with we the people. You think you know and you don't. I'm addressing Mr. Richer at the moment. Also, I would like to tell you that I electioneered all throughout my district, and that was 10 different polls that I electioneered at, and every single one of those polls, I had people coming out panic-stricken because they were freaking out that their ballot was not accepted. They did not know if it was legitimate. They were told to throw it into the famous, infamous box number 3, or they were told to go and come back another time. Every poll I visited, I had no idea what to tell them because I'm outside as an electioneer. They're coming to our tent asking us what to do. So that's something else. And I want to know from all of you, how do we get to address the questions that we're coming up and concerns, the gal before me, the concerns that we have, machines breaking down. You're going to listen to us talk for 2 minutes and then you're going to go off. You know something? I feel that you guys forget you represent we the people. And it's our concerns here. We have no confidence at all in our election process.
Thank you very much for your time. Just as a please again, please, no outbursts. And as a reminder, once all public comment is done, then we're going to have presentations from our co-directors of elections who will address many of the issues that have been raised today. Ms. Abril, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yes,
and then if just before you get started, if we can invite up Jean Pierce and Michelle Althor. So if you two could come up over here, and then Ms. Abril, if you could please state your name and address for us.
Yes, my name is Lydia Abril. My address is 2501 West Wickenburg Way. I represent Wickenburg Action Group. I have something to share to you. share with you with regards to what God has to say to all elected officials, every one of them. And this is found in the book of Psalms, chapter 58. Justice, you high and mighty politicians, don't even know the meaning of the word. Fairness, which of you has any left? Not one. All your dealings are crooked. You give justice in exchange for bribes. These men are born sinners, lying from their earliest words. They are poisonous, deadly snakes, cobras that close their ears to the most expert of charmers. Oh God, break off their fangs. Tear out the teeth of these young lions, Lord. Let them disappear like water into thirsty ground. Make their weapons useless in their hands. Let them be as snails that dissolve into slime, and as those who die at birth, who never see the sun. God will sweep away both old and young. He will destroy them more quickly than wicked men, more quickly than a cooking pot can feel the blazing fire of thorns beneath it. The godly shall rejoice in the triumph of the right. They shall walk in the blood-stained fields of slaughtered wicked men. Then at last everyone will know that good is rewarded and that there is a God who judges justly here on earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, please, no outbursts. Mr. Henninger. And if you could please state your address as well.
Chairman Gates, members of the board, Don Henninger, 82 East Del Camino in Scottsdale. I'm also co-lead of the Arizona Democracy Resilience Network. It's a network of several hundred community, business, nonprofit, and faith leaders across Arizona, Republicans and Democrats alike. We work in support of fair, safe, and secure elections, the backbone of our democracy. Here today to support your certification of the election results in our county, seeing no evidence that anyone who wanted to vote couldn't, and no evidence that any votes were not counted. We share the disappointment over the technical problems on Election Day, and we empathize with voters who were inconvenienced, but we appreciate that our leaders and our election workers reacted quickly to the challenges and were transparent and upfront at every stage of the process. On behalf of our network, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to the thousands of workers and volunteers who spent many hours working to bring this election to a conclusion. Thank you to our leaders who admitted the challenges, moved quickly to solve them, and had the courage to stand up to those who criticized and sometimes threatened them along the way. Thank you for your time and for your service to our county and to our country.
Thank you, Mr. Henninger. Again, please, no outbursts. At this time, I would like to welcome up to join us here on the line Kathy Roscoe, and also Barbara Russell, and then Jean Pierre. Sorry, my apologies.
I'm sorry, you mangled my name. It's Joanne Pierce.
Sorry, Joanne Pierce, my apologies. Your address, and then we'll go ahead and have you get started.
Let me get my glasses on. Thank you, BOS, and all for hearing me today. I am Joanne Pierce, an in-town resident of Wickenburg. On October 10th, 2022, a massive hurricane hit and devastated Florida. On November 8th, 2022, a few weeks later, 7.5 million people voted on written ballots in the general election. 5 to 7 hours later, all ballots were hand counted, and the winners of those elections were announced. Yes. Meanwhile, in our Arizona, U5 BOS's and AZSOS's department was incapable of providing anything resembling a final count for weeks. Every single one of you ought to be ashamed of how Arizona is now the laughing stock of the nation because Maricopa County is inept. Corruption occurred, people's votes haven't been counted, and thousands of votes have been disenfranchised. Arizona needs to vote and count as Florida did November 8th, 2022. Shame to hell to Maricopa County for dragging our fine Arizona straight to the toilet.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Michelle Alther. And if you could please state your address.
Michelle Altair, I'm from Goodyear, and I was a marshal at this last election. But prior to even having November 8th, when I went to training, as we were practicing on the tabulators, they didn't even work on that day. We were given different ballots, and as you scan the ballots, they're supposed to have a certain code on there, and none of them worked. I think maybe one out of how many tries we did, he kept saying, oh, it's supposed to give this code. So they didn't even work when we were training. On election day, few minutes after the first person comes up to get their scan their ballots, misread, turn it over, misread. And that's how it happened for the whole entire day. We also had an incident where our scanners lost power. We didn't realize when they set them up, they didn't turn them on. They didn't have the power strip on. So 2 hours into it, our scanners went down. It took about 30 minutes for them to reboot, and so we were able to scan. I was able to keep people at the polling place because I told them stay there. But I know, you know, with everything that you're hearing, all the testimony, I know what I'm saying is probably just going to be dropped into bin number 3 as I'm dropping the report. This election report is going right into bin number 3. You know, because the thing of it is, we are living in perilous times. This is a battle of good and evil. You can sit as lords over us, and I hope that anybody that's running for a position in politics would get it through their heads that when they're elected, they're not gods over us. They are elected as, and they're servants to us, we the people. And there will come a day when you will sit before a higher judge. You will sit before a higher judge, and you will be held accountable for your role in what's been going on, for the deception and mocking God with calling evil good and good evil. Thank you.
And ma'am, if I could just ask you which voting center that was at that
It was
you were
at the
working at?
Estrella Foothills.
Thank you very much for your work on Election Day. And then at this point, let's ask up Vern Bybee and Randy Miller. So if they can come up here, and then we have Kathy Roscoe. Yeah, please come join us. Thank you. And then if you could state your address.
My name is Kathy Roscoe. I live in Maricopa County. I came here today to get an up-close and personal look at the 7 traitors to the United States Constitution.
Okay, again,
are
please.
Sitting at that desk. You were set to receive a subpoena this morning at 9:30. What did you do? You called your meeting for 8 a.m. What are you hiding? I will not repeat your election crimes. I will just say, not certifying the machines constitutes a form of interference. And in case no one has enlightened you people, interference in an election in the United States of America, Mr. Gates, is a capital offense. It's considered treason, punishable by the death penalty. So it's obvious why you, Hobbs, and Deep State Ducey are desperate to keep your cronies in office. Our country indeed has a pandemic of suspect illegally elected officials and their self-appointed bureaucrats who think they do not have to do their jobs, yet stay on the government payroll. You are openly and arrogantly violating your oath of office. We want a new 2022 state election not run by the people at this desk or Katie Hobbs. 75% of the citizens who went to vote stated that they were downright angry about the trajectory of the country, yet the foreign-owned mainstream media claims that we're evenly divided. That gives you plenty of cover to go in a back room and print as many ballots as you need to CYA. I will just say this. The voting booth is supposed to be
Your time is
a
up.
time for a peaceful revolution. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make a violent revolution necessary.
Your time is up, and again, I just want to clarify, reference was made to the subpoena that this board received from Senator Kelly Townsend. This board, in fact, responded to it, hand-delivered a copy to it before 9:30 this morning. Next speaker is Barbara Russell. Thank you so much. If you could state your address, please.
Yes, I'm Barbara Russell, and I'm from Wickenburg, Arizona, proudly for the last 20 years. I have 50 years experience as electioneer. I'm older than I look. On November 8th, 2022, I arrived at our polling place in Wickenburg as an in-person voter. And already there were issues, printers having problems, tabulators having problems. By the time I finished filling in my ballot, they did manage to print my ballot, and I turned it in, or stood in line actually. There were already 2 lines in front of 2 tabulators. Surprising, only 2 tabulators, that was my first thought. And they were sporadically breaking down. The poor troubleshooter on location was taking them apart when they stopped running and cleaning them, she said. They were talking about the pens. They kept having different ideas. They were telling people in line as I was in, voters, we were in line. And anyway, about half of the people that were ahead of me in line were unable to vote. Their ballot, one lady tried 20 times, different directions to get her ballot accepted, and I thought there was a restriction on how many they could do, but they continued to try to get it to go through, and it would not. Gentleman in front of me was actually yelling, and they escorted him out because they said he was interfering with the process, but it was because he was unable to vote. So I went out to my little table as electioneer at 7. By 8 o'clock, I had contacted the GOP hotline to report what was going on and that the tabulators weren't working. 50% of the voters were being turned away, so 50%. When I went to school, 50% was a failing grade.
Thank you. Your time is up. I appreciate your testimony. Next, I would like to invite up Sharon Huber, and then also to get in line, and then also Monsi Arredondo, please. So we have Vern Bybee. Thanks for joining us. If you could please state your address.
I was born just down the block. This is my home. I was part of the Maricopa audit. And during the Maricopa audit, you guys admitted that you were off on count. How is it that these multi-million-dollar machines can be off on count? You admitted it. And then another point. Why is it that during your 2 weeks to take the count, there are trucks going from the counting center to the printing center? There's no reason there should be any trucks going in and out of that counting center. Those votes should be there, and they should stay there. Why are trucks transporting back and forth to Runbeck? Which, by the way, the Maricopa audit was told, do not touch Runbeck. Runbeck is who prints our votes. Why is there trucks going back and forth? I pose that question. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. And next, Randy Miller. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm a resident of Maricopa County. First, I want to address that this whole process of the 2 minutes is a violation of our First Amendment right to to petition our government and address our grievances. You have no right to limit our time while you give government officials that work for us all the time in the world that they need to talk about what they're gaslighting us about. The second thing I want to say is everything that Mr. Richard was talking about, early ballots, mail-in ballot, it's a violation of the Constitution. Have you read Article 7, suffrage and elections, Section 10? It says general elections shall occur. Shall under law is mandatory. I'm sure you're aware of this, Mr. Liddy. Is mandatory under law, shall occur the first Tuesday following the first Monday of November. When you vote, that's an election. When you sit at your table and you fill out a ballot and you mail it in and you just voted prior to the election day, violation of the Constitution. The other section is Article 7, Section 7, which specifies only the legal votes will determine the winner. If we have all these problems, put it in box number 3, it doesn't tabulate, mail them in, you don't know what they are. Mr. Richard himself, when I met with him prior to the other election, he said they have 26,000 people that they've identified on the voter rolls that they're trying to clean up. He's been there 2 years and he did what, 1,500, I think he said? And he says this is the best it's been. That's what they've identified. We have no proof of the voter rolls. You have an election that was a shambles. Instead of praising the people that were running the election, you need to fire them for incompetence. Because this whole thing was a sham. You're violating the Constitution. You're violating our rights by saying you can only petition the government for 2 minutes. Where's your authority to do that? Who died made you king? This has got to stop. The election was a sham. We would like to have a re-election, and we would like to have people there that actually know what they're doing, make sure we're not using the machines, and we're doing it properly, and then we have time to air our grievances with you as the constitutional permits.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you for your testimony. And so we have are you Sharon Huber? Yes? Okay, if we, do we have Monsi Arredondo here?
He had to go home.
Had to go home? Okay, thanks so much. And then if we could also invite up Simon Caskey, and then also Mike Peterson. Ms. Huber, your address?
Hello, I am a resident of Maricopa County. My name is Sharon Huber, and I live in Wickenburg, Arizona. I feel that the voters of Arizona, and in particular Maricopa County and Wickenburg, had their votes disenfranchised because Maricopa County had so many problems on Election Day with their printers, tabulators, and other machines malfunctioning throughout the day. Thousands could not vote. Thousands left discouraged. I was one of those voters disenfranchised in Wickenburg and Maricopa County. I tried to vote in person, and I was told by the poll workers I had the right kind of ballot, that they had problems with the printers at first, and then the tabulators all day long. Sure enough, the tabulator would not accept my ballot. I tried over and over for close to an hour, going from one tabulator to the other tabulator, turning it right side up, upside down, and every which way. I inspected my ballot to make sure I had filled in completely all the circles and that there were no stray marks. And I used a black ink pen. My ballot looked perfect. And no matter what I did, the tabulator would not accept it. I watched dozens of voters having the same problems. We were given an option, put it in drawer 3, labeled misreads, and assured it would be counted that night. Actually, I didn't find out until 10 days before I got confirmation that it was counted. Or we could spoil it or try again, go to a different town to vote. They said 60 plus tabulators in Maricopa County were not working correctly. I reluctantly finally put my ballot in drawer 3 ballot and noticed there were hundreds of ballots stuffed in both tabulators in drawer 3. I was later told there were 17,000 plus ballots in drawer 3. I was a poll worker a number of times under different Secretary of States and recorders. We never had problems, not like this. How can elections be fair when tens of thousands of people are not able to vote? I know many people who never got confirmation their vote was counted.
Thank you, Ms. Huber, for your time. And then, are you Simon? No? Yes. Yes, Simon. If you could come join us. Are you Mike Peterson? Yes. If you could please speak, and then if we could have Simon come up, and also Raquel Cantaresi. Do we have Raquel here? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, your address, please.
I believe it is on the form.
There you go.
It is. Thank you very much.
Can I begin?
You may.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Supervisors, I was a poll worker. I worked at the Paradise Valley Community College 14-day center. So I was working for 14 days straight, and what I will say that I've seen is voters this cycle have in fact been disenfranchised. When they come in and they bring their ballot and they can't turn it in because there's a line to turn it in, or they can't vote because they are told they can't check in because they weren't able to properly check out at the previous polling center they were at, because we as poll workers were not taught how to check out voters at our poll centers. So if a tabulator goes down and they have to come to our poll center, you know what this means? It means that they're still checked in at another poll center and being forced to take provisional ballots which are not being counted. In other words, they see this, they see the long line from the printer, and then at my poll center, where we literally had at 7 p.m. on election day, 675 people waiting in line. Of those 675, do you know how many came in? 150. It means that you have personally disenfranchised voters. They have came, they have seen, and they have given up because they know what is going on. And if you willingly certify this election, look at it. Every single one of us who's a poll center worker right now is making fun of you. Every single one of us. You are the butt of our jokes.
Disaster.
Now here's your chance. Validate yourself. Save yourself. Be the hero for once in your life.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Our next speaker, Raquel. Thank you. And then I would like to invite up Susan Truix and Ben Berquam, please.
My name is Raquel Contechesi. I'm a Maricopa County resident. There's a lot to say, but a lot's already been said at the last meeting and this meeting. You have had people personally come up here and testify of their personal experiences as a voter, as a poll worker, and as an poll watcher. I was also an observer, and I can let you know that there were multiple problems going on, just as you've already heard and that you guys are already aware of. I think one issue that's kind of not being highlighted enough is that in drawer 3, when the polls close, when the last voter leaves, when the equipment is being taken down, when tabulators were opened, there were, at one site in particular of someone I know, they did not separate drawer 3 ballots from the tabulated ballots. That's in the tabulator. In my particular site, they did at least initially try to rerun the drawer 3 ballots, but then at that point, and there was only 2 that ever, took from, I don't know, the hundreds that they were trying to rerun, they commingled the untabulated ballots of drawer 3 with the tabulated ballots. There is no way to ever sort that and track that. Those are lost votes. Those are lost voices. You guys have heard. I have no idea why you can say, and Richard can say, things like election run extremely well, mastery with election process, professionalism and integrity. How can you say that after hearing people coming up personally, not just here, but you've heard other reports, but here, you cannot say that this went well. People were disenfranchised. There were problems. Things were not run okay. So quit trying to say that. Just acknowledge it, and let's figure out what we need to do to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. And may I ask you, thank you for your testimony, so you were a worker at this?
I was an observer.
Observer.
Yeah,
and which one were you an observer at?
I was over off of Central Lutheran. It was off of Camelback and 7th Street, right before there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, so I would like to ask as well, Scott Brogy. I'm not, what's that? Brogy, and Linda Atley, if they could also come up. And then Susan, if you could please join us. Susan Truax, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, my name is Susan Truax, and I am a native of Arizona. I am from Scottsdale. I am an early voter that you're talking about. I was very concerned from the 2020 election because of what happened there. So my husband and I decided that instead of mailing our ballots in, we would go to the county recorder and deliver it, hand deliver our votes. After spending much time going over our votes and filling out everything exactly as it should have been filled out, we took it down, and actually, I hate to admit it, but we left our votes at home because we both thought the other person had them. So we made 2 trips down to the county recording office, and at that time, we gave it to them and weren't greeted well, but it was okay. We gave them our vote, and and we said we want it tracked. We want to make sure that our votes count. Got home, didn't hear from them 2-3 days. When it came almost the 8th, now we did this a week before the election. We just wanted to make sure this was taken care of. On the day before the election, I actually called in 2 days before the election, waited 25 minutes to talk to somebody. And I know the term professionalism has been used here, 25 minutes just to talk to someone to have a question answered. When I got on the phone, I explained the whole situation, and she told me that, it should be counted. Okay, so still no notification, nothing that my vote was counted. So then I wanted to do the pure vote where you have to, I went through the whole process, giving them the last 4 digits of my Social Security, filling out all their forms to make sure that my vote was counted. Still no notice. Then my husband, we called about his. They said his signature is fine, which of course my signature should have been fine, and they said that his vote should be fine. It should be counted. To this day, our votes have never been certified as far as them counting.
So, Ms. Truax, thank you so much, and we'll make a point to follow up with you on that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Next, if I can ask Barbara Jennings and Roger Mayeb also to get in line here, and we have Ben Berquam. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Supervisor. I typically don't speak at these. I represent folks. I have an organization called Frontline America, and I also represent a media outlet, Real America's Voice News. We were denied entry, along with my colleague Jordan Conradson, to the election office, and I figured this was an appropriate time to redress my grievance. I spend most of my time on the southern border exposing the invasion that's going on down there, especially here in Arizona, and what's coming into our country. The biggest concern I have is if this election is certified, the only parties that will benefit from this are the cartels. They've taken over Mexico, and sadly, they've taken over many politicians in America. What we saw on Election Day was outrageous, and to say that it was anything but that is either you think we're stupid or you're just that arrogant. What we've seen from you in the election office and your response, very simple questions needed to be asked. 2020 was a disaster. How was 2022 worse? You cannot say that you can certify an election when half of the voting machines were down. Was it 1,000 people that were disenfranchised? Was it 10,000 of the people that were there in line, or the people that didn't show up because they saw on the news the election machines didn't work? The fact that you've already made up your minds, you've already made the decision, this is all semantics. All of us coming up here and speaking is semantics. You've already made your vote. You've already made this decision. You said the world is watching, and you're right. They're watching, and they're watching this disaster play out in front of them. You responded to the AG with the most pathetic, inept response I've ever seen. You have not redressed the grievances of these people. That is the question, and the answer that I hear from everyone across this room is you cannot certify. So the question is, what is the remedy? The fact that you were on a PAC that was going against Kari Lake, as well as Richer, going against Kari Lake, how can you say that there's no conflict of interest? You have a Secretary of State running against a gubernatorial candidate. How can you say there's no conflict of interest? And then your machines go down on Election Day. It is absolutely outrageous. If you certify today, the only thing you'll be certifying is your corruption.
Thank you. Again, please, no outbursts. Next speaker is Scott Brogy. If you could please state
Good
your
morning.
address for
It's
us.
Scott Brogian. I live in Mesa, Arizona.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm not here to talk about all the problems with the recent election, because the notion that a state treasurer candidate, Kimberly Yee, down ballot, could get 100,000 more votes than a very popular governor candidate, Kari Lake, makes these results laughable to anyone who can count. From election day equipment failures that disproportionately impacted Republican voters in something like half the 200 plus Maricopa voting centers, to the weeks it took you to count through your vendor, Runbeck Election Services, without the inconvenience of observers, this election stinks. The effect this had was long lines of voting locations, which left out thousands of American citizens simply trying to cast their vote. My own experience when my wife and I went to vote the morning of Election Day in Mesa was that I couldn't wait hours because I had to go to work. My wife ended up waiting in line over 2 hours to vote, while I came back later and waited an hour to vote. But many others couldn't do that. Many people also passed me in line to drop off their completed green ballots personally at the polling center. Who knows, based on what we've heard today, if those hundreds of thousands of votes were counted correctly, I think Mr. Ricker said it was 290,000, or simply mixed up in box 3. At best, this is incompetence. At worst, it's something much more evil. You took weeks to count the votes, so why the rush to certify it? You have pending subpoenas from the Attorney General as well as other candidates. Surely you realize that by not addressing these questions, you only undermine the public's faith in the election process. With all these problems, intentional or not, the only way to restore confidence in the process is to address these subpoenas and do not certify this election prematurely. Today, the 5 of you have an opportunity to stand up for what's right, but you will be judged. Would you rather stand with God, be judged by the world, or stand with the world and be judged by God?
Thank you very much. I would like to invite up to the line here. Do we have Barbara Jennings? Okay, she went home. Okay.
May I speak?
Yeah, I'm just going to call a couple more people up, so we're ready. So do we have Roger Maib? Is he here? Okay. Andrew Electorate? Do we have Andrew here? Thank you. And then David Clements, also, if you could come over here and get in line for us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Attlee, for your patience. And if you could please state your address for us.
I live in Phoenix, have for 40 years.
Welcome.
And I'm reading this on behalf of Barbara Jennings, who had to go to work.
Thank you.
Today, I want to speak of your legacy, how the people of Arizona and your children will suffer because you continue to steal the voice of Arizona. The fact that Stephen Richer and Bill Gates formed a coalition against the grassroots candidates is enough of a reason for their immediate resignation. Now another scandal with FTX stealing money from the Americans with the false narrative it's going to Ukraine, when in fact it went to the majority of Democrats, including Ruben Gallego. All the suffering in our state and country is a direct result of the corruption and stealing of our elections. Every child that dies from fentanyl, the increase in homelessness, is a direct result of your weak, corrupt leadership. Resign and dissolve the Maricopa County elections. That is the only answer for free and fair elections. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, Andrew Electorate. Thanks for joining us, and if you could please state your address.
I'd rather not.
That's fine.
My name is Andrew. I'm one of the voters, obviously, and I just want to ask you, did you watch your own press conference where you acknowledged that there were so many issues with many machines, and then later it became known that there were a lot more issues with a lot more machines. So if you haven't seen that yourself, or if you didn't have you heard yourself speak those words, then I can understand why you would thank somebody like this for doing the terrible job that he did at his election. Yes. Also, yeah, but I'm assuming that you're an intellectual. But so if you know what you said and you know what is available to the public, how can you then say that this was a well-run election and then thank this guy, thank anything, or just say that this election went well in any way? It just does not make sense. To anybody who's watching this on TV right now, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, if this happened to anybody, this is clear voter disenfranchisement. There's nothing else to say. So knowing that there's plenty of evidence, there's plenty of information out there that will tell you that this was anything but a well-run election, and that there's a potential for voter disenfranchisement, and knowing that there's pending lawsuits, there's pending evidence for you to still see before you move forward with this, right? There was an AG letter to the Maricopa County attorney, which was that response, sir, it was one of the worst from Mr. Liddy. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I could have written a better fake response to tell AG to here, take this and shut up. Like, this was like the most terrible and most obvious and blatantly misleading response just ahead of this meeting, right? Just to say, okay, a checkbox, I replied to you.
All right, your time is up. Thank you so much. If we could invite John Landry to come up in line, and then we'll also have Mary Ziola. And so we have David Clements. Thank you for joining us. Oh, yeah, if you could please state your address.
David Clements, slave. That's what I am to this system, to your corruption. This is outrageous. This is a national crisis, and you're giving people 2 minutes to address a national crisis. And the way that you guys can just sit there, it's disgusting. Watching you pledge allegiance to my flag was disgusting, the way that you sold us out. You said you don't have the statutory authority to do anything. You're going to take a yes-no vote. What does that tell us? Yes or no? If it's just yes, then why are you here? Why are you here then? You have discretion. And when you certify something, you're saying that it's trustworthy. There's nothing trustworthy about this. This is theater. It's optics. I was a long-time prosecutor. I went after drug traffickers. This is vote trafficking at its finest. I've seen the criminal element. You are vote traffickers. You are a vote trafficker. Criminal. What are you going to do about it? You've sold us out. You've sold us out. You've sold us out. So we're not here to be civil. You're worried about language. We're worried about our voices being stolen and never getting a fair election again. That's what we're worried about. So a curse upon you, a curse upon all of you, you smug, smug people. What, you got another chicken farm that needs to burn down, Mr. Hickman?
Mr. Chairman. All right,
Am I
again,
bothering you?
we're
Am I bothering you? Because this election bothered me. And you're doing nothing about it. I don't care about that stupid buzzard. This is sickening. You have the power as the chairperson to enlarge the time limits and actually hear your constituents instead of putting a muzzle on them.
Thank you.
Right
your time is up. Thank you very much. All right, next speaker is John Landry.
And these sheriffs, you got to know who you stand with. This is disgusting.
Mr. Landry, thank you for coming to testify today. If you care to speak, care to mention your address?
My name is John Landry. I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions, and you said at the beginning of the session that you had to approve this. That was your responsibility to certify this result. My question to you is, and then something can be challenged. So I would like the attorney for the county to go on record saying that when all the corruption is discovered, that they can uncertify this election and change it, because we're always told after the fact, oh, there's no process in place to decertify after it's done. So I want someone on record from the state, from the courts, to say, yes, there is a process and exactly what that process is. Second, all of these votes, that the problems that happen on election day for multiple machines, and people were made to put their ballots in drawer 3. Did anybody, and do we have video evidence of those drawers being empty before they were put in? If we don't know if those drawers are empty, how can we possibly know that there weren't additional ballots put in there? You brought the ballots to Runbeck. Was anybody there to verify that ballots weren't printed? Runbeck has access to the voter rolls so they can know who has voted and who hasn't voted. Do we know they weren't printing more ballots? There's no way to judge this election and know it was done fair. So how can you certify something if you don't know it's been properly counted, that additional ballots weren't added? We just don't know, and no one can trust this, so how can we have confidence moving forward? The vote needs to be transparent. We need to be able to have confidence in it.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Do we have Mary, you're there. And then as you're coming up, if I can ask Kimberly Burleson, Robert Canterbury to come up, please. Thank you. Mary Ziola, if you could mention your address for us.
My name is Mary Ziola, and I live in Surprise, Arizona. And I was a poll worker at Happy Trails Resort in Surprise. On Election Day, November 8th, I went to Happy Trails Resort voting site at 5:30 a.m. and did not get home until 10 p.m. There was a line of people waiting to vote at 6 a.m. at Happy Trails. I was assigned to work at the tabulators. I noticed the 2 tabulators were rejecting perfectly marked ballots. I would ask the voter to insert their ballot many different ways, including right side up, face down, upside down, and when it was still rejected, I had them insert the ballot into the second tabulator. It was then rejected. If it was rejected by the second tabulator, I would ask the voter if they would like to go to the head of the voting line and get a new ballot. Some did, and sometimes the tabulator would accept the new ballot, and sometimes it did not. If it was again rejected, they were asked to put it in box 3. Why were the tabulators not replaced? The technician did not come out until late in the afternoon and did not fix the problem. The voting lines became extremely long because of the excessive time it took trying to get the ballots to be accepted by the tabulators. Some voters were very angry and insisted that they were not going to put their ballots into the drawer 3 slot because they did not believe their vote would be counted. This is voter suppression. Many voters told me they did not have time to get in line again to recast a new ballot. One such person was a policeman, was on duty, and said he had to leave on an emergency call. Another voter told me she was a nurse and needed to get back to work. There were 157 misread ballots that day. It was a complete chaos the whole day. Throughout the day, there were many mail-in ballots brought into the drop box. When the polling sites closed, we were told not to count them, but simply put them into bins and send them down to MCTEC. We filled 2 large bins with these envelopes. Why were these mail-in ballots not counted? Why are they taken to Runbeck to be scanned with no observers when there was no count of how many there were taken from the polling site? Ballots could be thrown out or illegal ones added in at Runbeck, which opens up the possibility to election fraud. And how does Steve Richer know there were 290,000 mail-in ballots on Election Day when they were not counted at the voting place? Also, the cables for our tabulators were missing the night before the election. Our troubleshooter had to drive down to Phoenix to get the cable, so I don't know how they could have been
Your
tested.
time is up. Thank you very much for your work as a poll worker. We also have Samantha Paez and Chris Hamlet. If you could both come up and get in line. And then Kimberly Burleson. Do we have Kimberly Burleson? Yeah. Thanks for coming down.
As you stated, my name is Kimberly Burleson. I'm a native of Arizona, and 2 minutes is not enough time for me to say what I'm going to say, but I'm going to boil it down to 3 points. There's a statistician online that's already done statistics on the disenfranchisement based on Richard's numbers and how he calculated people waiting in line. It's over hundreds of thousands of people that were not able to vote, that they disenfranchised. The second thing is everybody that's been paying attention for way years before 2020, and then when 2020 came along, and they've been paying attention since then, do not trust these machines. There have been investigations going on for 2 years. The evidence is in. They've got it all. It's going to bubble up to the top. If we had journalists that were doing their job and asking questions, people would know this by now, but they don't. So here's my next point. It's going to bubble up. This is a fork in the road right now, today. You all have the option. There are people that don't know what they don't know. I don't know if it's you guys don't know or you are purposely disenfranchising the whole world with this gaslighting this stuff, okay? So you either, at this point in the fork in the road, you either open your mind and you get on the, with the American people and you figure out what's going on and you let us revote with no machines and do it on paper, hand count in our precincts, and prove to us this election was free and fair because there's just too many questions about it. Or you go on with this charade, and at one point, you're going to be put on the spot, and we're going to ask what you knew and when you knew it. That's the bottom line. And I don't even need the 13 seconds.
Thank you very much. Next, Robert Canterbury. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My name is Robert Canterbury. I live in Glendale. I'm a 20-year Navy veteran, two-time Iraq War veteran, former counterterrorism officer for a Navy SEAL team, former head of security for President Trump's campaign headquarters in Long, Virginia, and a 2024 candidate to get rid of Clint Hickman from Arizona politics once and for all.
No, please, no outbursts.
In 1996, Maricopa County began using Dominion voting machines and other equipment in our elections. They did so with the recommendations of county officials. Since September 2021, I have spoken to several former county supervisors throughout the state of Arizona, and all of them have told me that this was your responsibility and your duty. You have the power to make the recommendation to the state legislator to make changes for voting in Maricopa County. Is it easier for 6 people, you 5 and Stephen Richer, to change the minds of 1.5 million people, or is it easier for 6 people to change the minds, or is it easier for 1.5 million people to change the minds of 6 people? Until you publicly come out and make recommendations to the state legislator, please stop telling us, the people of Maricopa County, to do the job that you're too afraid to do, to go against the machine and the McKinney-Acts to do so. Many of the state legislators are rhinos, much like yourselves, and they too do not listen to us. You can continue to pass the buck to us and the state legislators because you are too immature to realize that you are not perfect and that you do not make mistakes. This is from the Recorder's website. Maricopa County Recorder's Office is widely recognized as a leader in recording services, voter registration, and elections in the nation. Are you serious, Stephen Richer?
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. Next, if we could call up Teresa Breithout to join us, and then Samantha Paez. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Paez, and I'm a mother of 5. My husband's home with the kids right now, but I felt like I had to be here because if we don't stand up now, I don't know when we will stand up. I'm a PC and active in my legislative district. I remember when Mr. Richer came and he was running, before he ran for office, I was so happy to hear that you were going to do something different. I trusted you and voted for you, and I'm sad. I'm really sad today. I feel extremely disappointed. All of the things that we can do from home, send emails, make phone calls, get people to show up, it just seems like nothing ever happens. And I have a duty to teach my children the importance of voting, of being an active citizen, but it's very discouraging to know that it just seems like it's all for naught today. Like if we don't have this fair election, then and it's a selection of our leaders, what can we teach our kids? What can we pass down to them? What can they strive for? If all of our efforts, us grassroots people who are standing here telling you, we saw with our eyes problems. I was electioneering that day too. I mean, there's so many awesome poll workers here that gave their time and saw so many problems I mean, that in and of itself, you have eyewitness testimonies from so many people, sworn affidavits, show you it was maladministrated. It was not, it could not be certifiable, because if you're certifying accuracy, that you don't have it. So, I don't know, I'm here today. We have to do something. I agree with what everyone said about the hand counts and back to precinct voting, and I hope that you'll be, that you do have the power to do something for us today, and that you'll make a courageous step and do something different. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I would like to call up Leslie Shepard, if Leslie Shepard can join the line over there. And we have, is it Chris Hamlet? Yes, Mr. Hamlet, thanks for joining us.
My name is Chris Hamlet. I was a candidate for the Mesa School Board, 82nd Airborne veteran. I was a medic in the United States Army. I'm quite certain you've already made your decision, just like Ben said. We understand the decision was already made. So everything at this point is nothing more than political theater and listening to our comments so that you can get us all out of here and still do what you were planning on doing before we got here. So let me frame this right. We're not framing this properly. This is a war between good and evil. And you all represent evil, including you. I want to look in your eyes, especially you. I see the way that you look at people when they come up here and speak truth. Such arrogance dripping from your mouth, just like the smile on your face right now. You guys represent evil, good versus evil. All you God-fearing men and women out here need to understand that and get up every day and start donning your body armor before you step on this battlefield. We cannot continue to fight this war with these earthly weapons and continue to talk on deaf ears. We must get God in the middle of this thing. We must start off our days with our helmet of salvation, our sword of the Spirit, shield of faith, breastplate of righteousness, belt of truth, and our feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. And understand that if you do not start your day off like that, you are stepping on this battlefield ill-prepared, and we will keep getting waxed by these evil people in charge. Okay? So I just want to say something about Mr. Richard here. He came up here, and during your thorough reading of laws and processes and everything you said, not one time did you say a trash bag was acceptable to put ballots in. Not once. Yet that's what we have going on at this time. You're not losing friends because of the way that you handled this election process. You're losing friends because you're evil and corrupt, and you know it, okay? That's why that's why none of you have friends. I can't stand that smirk on your face, and neither can anybody here. Keep doing it. You're showing us exactly who you are, Mr. Gallardo. You're showing us exactly. Now, Pentel pens, why are you telling us to use Pentel felt tips when the ballots clearly say black and blue ink only? None of this was done properly.
Your time is up. Thank you,
God bless
Mr.
you all.
Hamlet.
Stand with this man.
Okay. All right, so we have Teresa. Yes, thank you for joining us. And then while you're walking up there, let's invite Janelle Weaver to speak as well, to wait in line over there.
Yes.
Thank you, and if you could state your address, please.
Yes, I'm Teresa Breithaupt, and I live in Phoenix. I don't normally do this, so I'm really kind of nervous. I'm doing this for my child and my grandchildren. I feel that we're losing our nation because we can't have fair, transparent elections. I do have a question. Many of the issues I'm going to bring up have already been addressed, but one of my questions is why we have board members on this board that have formed a PAC that went after conservative candidates. I just don't understand that. Also, Mr. Richards, I'd like to, I think you need to stop boasting about the great job you've done, and you guys need to stop saying he did such a great job when it's evidence that we had long lines. The majority of the machines weren't working. There were people that could not vote, and there is evidence of voter harvesting. I do not have faith in our elections, and I feel that my vote did not even count. I think it's time that we go to same-day vote, paper ballots, and no more machines. And I do thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, let me call up Ben Scheel to the line as well, and then Leslie Shepard. Do we have Leslie Shepard? Yes? Thank you so much.
Born at Luke Air Force Base. I'm going to be playing here is before I judge.
Would you please speak into the microphone so the audience can hear your testimony? I'm a computer programmer. Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I work for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
And when you say did just that, it would rig an election?
It would flip the vote 51-49 to whoever you wanted it to go to and whichever race you wanted to win.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials that might be on county boards of elections could detect?
They'd never see it.
Mr. Would you answer that question once again?
They would never see it.
So I'm giving you that as a testimony before a judge. That is a man who helped rig an election. We know that that still exists. You know that still exists. I went to go vote. I didn't get to turn mine in. The man in front of me couldn't turn his in. The man behind me couldn't turn theirs in. And guess what? I checked on my vote. It never went through. You have heard from many people, people in charge of the election. We are coming to you asking you to dig deep in your heart and not be condemned to hell one day. And why am I saying that? Because I'm a party person? I don't have a party. I'm an independent. I'm the outcast. But you know what? I'm standing here for the Constitution of the United States. And you guys are who we're looking to. Sheriff's Department. You know why I praise you? Because you don't stand up under these people. You stand up under the Constitution of the United States of America. And without us standing up under that, we have nothing. Nothing. They've already taken people's countries away. Venezuela, Dominion machine. You guys know they're dangerous. You know they're corrupt. Please dig deep in your heart.
Thank you, Ms. Shepard. Your time is up. Next, and then I'd like to call up Veronica Corcoran and Gail Golick over here in line, and then Janelle Weaver. Thank you for joining us. If you could please state your address.
Hello, I'm Janelle Weaver. I live in Goodyear. I was a poll observer in Tonopah at the Valley Baptist Church on Election Day. I was there at 5:40 in the morning, so I saw the opening procedures, and I left at about 1:40. From the start, both tabulators were not working. I was told by the workers that the second machine wasn't working the night before during a test run, but the first one had ran perfectly until the morning. Maricopa County was notified about the second tabulator not working, and they were told that the county would send them one first thing in the morning. By the time I left at 1:40, there was not a second tabulator that was working. The inspector surmised that perhaps it was the printers that were the problem, and they were trying to figure that out. At 7:17 a.m., that's an hour and 17 minutes after the polls had opened, the first tabulator was working, but was only processing 1 out of 5 ballots. That's about 20, at about 8:30, only 26% of the ballots had been processed. That's a lot of people that did not get their ballots processed. As a poll observer, I witnessed the voters given 4 choices once their ballot was rejected from the tabulator. 1, wait and rerun your ballot. 2, spoil your ballot and try again, like they have all the time in the world. 3, spoil the ballot and check out of that polling station and go to vote elsewhere, which I heard is against a statute of Arizona. And of course, they were lastly given the choice to put their sacred ballot into the infamous door number 3. There were many voters that were very upset at this and didn't know what to do. Many did put their ballot in door number 3. During my 8 hours there at Tonopah.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Your time is up. Next, Ben Shield. If you could please state your address.
Yes, my name is Ben Shield and I'm from Phoenix. Thank you, Chairman Gates and supervisors,
My name is Ben Shield from Phoenix. I'm a proud supporter of democracy and protecting our elections and the results of them. I just want to take a moment to thank our election workers for all they do to keep our elections accessible, safe, and secure. We appreciate that they count every eligible vote, and even as the county grows, to make improvements on the speed of counting so we get results as quickly as possible. Thank you, Recorder Richer, for your seamless
please.
early voting record. We appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you in the future to improve the early voting system, as you spoke to earlier. Finally, thank you all on the board, in addition to the folks I thanked earlier.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shield. Again, can we please stop with the interruptions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you all for doing your duty as elected by the voters of this county. It shouldn't be controversial to do your duty and follow the law. Even in the face of misinformation, intimidation, and threats, which I feel that I heard today at this podium and is unacceptable, you are here with courage to carry out your duty, and your constituents know that, they care about that, and that is why they have reelected you. And I appreciate that as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Your time is up. Next, if we can invite up Tom Vanek, please. Please stop. Tom Vanek and Timothy Schwartz. And next, Veronica Corcoran. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor that I can speak because I come from a communist country and I don't want this to become communist country. My family in Venezuela lost everything and it was Dominion machine somehow. Interesting. First of all, I would like to ask you, Board of Supervisors, please help me understand how can Kathy Hobbs, current Secretary of State, be allowed to run for the election when she never recused herself? Anybody? How is she allowed to run for a governor when she never recused herself as a Secretary of State? Can somebody answer this, please? I'm questioning why is nobody talking about us over the media? I'm nobody. Like, I'm just like mother trying to save my family because my kids were taken from me when they were little because I fought for the medical freedom because I don't go there, okay? But I want to tell you this, guys. I feel this like a joke, but please, Arizona, I love Arizona. I love all of you. I love you, Stephen. I voted for you, okay? This is not about hate, love and hate. You know what? Love is to say no to wrongdoing, you know? And please try to understand those people, how upset they are. My family was murdered in the middle of the day because they refused to join the communists. And they plot on them murders and evil that is unimaginable. I have friends from Iraq. I don't want to tell you what they've seen happening at their doors. It's coming here, people, in your family too. Please, can we make any sense? We have God, we have America. Look, this flag there, do you know what that flag means? We can exercise our freedom. That's all that matters to me. We have, the biggest district is 10,000 people. We can divide it in 2,000 people and have voting done in one day, one person, on paper, because most votes were oppressed, were conservative votes, because we love to vote on election day, because you know what? Did you guys realize that our vote is the most sacred legal document? Our vote is a legal document. You cannot mess with it. Please try to understand. I have so much to tell you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. Next is Gail Golick. I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
My name's Roger Mabe. I'm from Wickenburg.
Let's see. I don't see your. Yeah, Gail Golick is the next speaker. I don't see your speaker
My card
form.
is up. It's in there. You've got it. It was just called. You mispronounced my name.
Okay. What was your name again?
It's Roger Mabe from Wickenburg.
Oh, was this, I'm not seeing it here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've been patiently waiting.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll go, I'll take your word for it. 2 minutes, please, if you could state your address, and then Gail Golick will be next.
Wickenburg, Arizona, and I'm with Wickenburg Action Group. I'm going to read from Proverbs 28:1. It says, "The wicked flee when no one is chasing them, but the godly are bold and lions." You see any bold people who are lions here? They're committed to this thing, so am I. When there is moral rot within a nation, its government topples easily. But with honest and sensible leaders, there is stability. Would you take a minute and just reflect on all the parents that have lost their kids in wars, who have fought for your right to vote? A vote. Not boxes and pallets of ballots. Ballots aren't votes. You're trampling on their sacrifice of the parents that lost their children. Do you feel that? This is a travesty. You mathematically cannot mess this up this many years in a row. It's mathematically impossible. Then I understand there's a few of you that have got a PAC where you put money in and your effort to make sure none of those MAGA people get voted in. You don't see the conflict of interest there? Moral decay, the fox watching the hen house, you just get that, you think it's okay, right? Is that your world? Yeah, it's not my world. I want you to feel shame. Shame is defined as painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by your consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. I'm going to leave you with this. You're playing into Klaus Schwab's "you will own nothing and you will be happy." Sirs and ma'ams, nothing is not owned by nobody. Everything is owned by somebody.
Thank you very
Your
much
stuff
for your
is going to
time.
be owned not by you, and you are playing into
Thank
their
you.
hand.
Gail Golick. And then I would like to invite up Jim O'Connor and Michelle Dillard.
Oh, we've got a power thing going on now.
All right, if you could please state your address for us.
Hi, my name is Gail Golick, and I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. Hello, my name is Gail Golick, and I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. And Chairman Gates, you mentioned that you are under obligation by law to canvass and certify this today. In fact, in the election procedural manual on page 234, it says a canvass must be conducted by the statutory deadline, but should not be conducted until all necessary audits have been completed to verify the accuracy and integrity of the election results. We do not have accuracy, we do not have integrity in these election results. I am asking that you stop the certification today until we can get some more audits. Okay, we need audits on the ballots. We've heard testimony today that there were intermingled legal ballots with, counted ballots with uncounted ballots in the same bin. You cannot reconcile that. You can't take the salt out of the soup. Okay, they're all in there, and you have no way to get them out. I'd also like to remind you, these machines have come into play and have taken over countries. South America right now is almost gone because of selections. Thank God for Brazil, or we would lose a continent, a whole continent to these machines. If you think that these are not selections, I beg you to sit down with me. I have another reason why you all should take a time to not certify, and that is I filed an ex parte emergency motion for temporary restraining order in an expedited election this morning. I am asking that you take the time to look through the pages of documents and proof that shows exactly what's going on.
All right, your
you have
time
a
is up.
constitutional oath.
Thank
Article
you.
7.7
Thank you
of the
very much.
Constitution the highest number of legal ballots
Your
shall
time is
determine
up,
the
ma'am.
winner.
Tom
Article
Vanek, thank you very
2.2,
much. Tom Vanek,
of
it's
the Constitution.
your opportunity to speak now.
There
You have
is
Tom
free
Vanek.
and equal elections, and this was not free, and this was not equal.
Okay, again, and again, it's been 2 minutes for everyone, and we're giving everyone the same amount of time. Tom Vanek, thank you for joining us. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tom Vanek. I am a Maricopa County resident. I worked as a registration clerk at the Dysart Community Center at 14414 North El Mirage Road on November 7th and 8th. On November 7th, we had a few issues with the printers, but by the end of the day, we had everything functioning properly. On the 8th, we arrived for our shift at 5:30 a.m. When we started our equipment check, none of the site books would connect to the server. We couldn't even access the time clock to punch in. These are the machines that don't connect to the internet, but they wouldn't connect to the internet, so we couldn't start our day. Anyway, our troubleshooter was not on site and could not immediately be reached, so we called the county hotline. The hotline was unable to resolve our issues, so we asked for a T-Tech to be dispatched to our location. Meanwhile, voters began to show up, and we started explaining to them what was going on. By 6 a.m., we had a small crowd, 10 to 15 voters, and we had to tell them we had no way of checking them in. They could either wait for the problem to be resolved or go to another polling location to vote. Most of them left. Eventually, our troubleshooter showed up, but could not fix the problem, and he suggested that we continue to wait for the T-Tech. While we were waiting, more voters showed up and had to be given their options. At least 50 people were turned away in this process. The T-Tech eventually showed up and got the site books to communicate with the main server, so we were able to clock in for our shift, but there was still a communication issue with the printers. When we finally ran test prints and it looked like the issue was fixed, we announced that the polls were open, and I checked in the first voter. It was now about 7 a.m. The first voter was checked in, but the printer immediately failed to print her ballot. We again started scrambling to figure out the problem and managed to get it resolved fairly quickly. We were officially in business, but we were over an hour
I'm so sorry.
late.
Your time is up. Thank you very much for your work as a poll worker. Next, Timothy Schwartz. Again, it's 2 minutes for everyone. Everyone is getting the same amount of time. Mr. Schwartz.
Why don't you give us more time to speak? Give us 5 minutes.
Mr. Schwartz.
Timothy Schwartz. We all remember just 6 years ago this month, 2016, I need you to remember this, on Election Day, if you stayed up till 1 a.m., on Election Day, we knew that Trump won, Hillary Clinton lost. That is the norm. Now they're asking us to believe that the norm is be patient, we're working as hard as we can, the votes are still coming in, we need some more time. This cannot be our new normal. We remember 2016. Stay up till 1 o'clock, you get the results. So I was here in this meeting before your panel 1 month ago after the primary, and I listened to Mr. Richer pat himself on the back saying we've done a tremendous job, and by the way, we've done this in record time. He used those words. And none of you, and I'm looking you in the eye, none of you said, time out, Mr. Richard, that is not accurate. You clapped and you cheered, and you said that, yeah, great job. He went on to tell you how he'd done everything expeditiously, and he met record time. This is not fact, and you're not calling it out for what it is. We need to be honest. You need to be honest. I need to be honest. All of us do. So why now does the new normal have we need more time? Well, we go back to 2020. Donald Trump was pulling out his second record win. Florida was called and on and on and on. And then we know what happened. They stopped the vote in the middle of the night because they weren't getting what they wanted. And when we wake up the next morning, everything flopped opposite directions. You're telling me they don't steal elections, yet we have proof. So we waited to see on midterms if this was going to happen again, if we would get our votes counted the day of the election.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Your time is up.
2 minutes already?
That was your 2 minutes. Thank you. Do we have Jim O'Connor here?
Your time's about up too.
Jim O'Connor's not here. All right. Michelle Dillard. Michelle Dillard, thank you so much. And if you can state your address, please.
No, thank you. My name is Michelle Dillard. I am what is being referred to as an election denier. It's a derogatory term meant to ridicule me, but my lack of faith and confidence in the so-called results of this so-called election is your failure, not mine. I had nothing to do with the machine malfunctions, the gross misconduct of election officials, or the lack of transparency by this body. My questions aren't made up out of whole cloth, but are directly related to issues reported by you, Chairman Gates. Just as the fact that you have chosen to thumb your noses at those you are supposed to serve instead of addressing our legitimate concerns is not my doing, yet I am the one being labeled. I am here today to oppose your certification of this election without any additional malfeasance outside of the issues already admitted by Chairman Gates and County Recorder Richer. This election is not certifiable. Printer issues of printers that were used recently in the primary election and that passed the required testing the day before Election Day, which spanned 30% of the voting centers, creating an undue burden and hardship on tens of thousands of voters, and without a verified explanation as to the source of the problem that can rule out foul play, illegitimizes the election and renders it uncertifiable. It was targeted voter suppression by the county, including elected officials with glaring conflicts of interest. The process of mitigation for your equipment failure was haphazard at best, deeming any results reported merely speculative and not certifiable. At this point, nothing short of a revote can produce reliable results worthy enough for a representative republic. Also, deciding on your own that a subpoena is illegal and that you don't have to comply with the timeline set forth in the subpoena is not an acceptable response, and you had alluded to that earlier today.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Dillard. Again, we did respond to the subpoena before it was due, even though we did have objections to it, but we responded and will continue to respond to it. Blake Lister, do we have Blake here? All right, the last speaker that we have, and then do we have Simon Castre? Simon? Okay. All right, so this will be our last speaker then. Blake, thank you for joining us. And then if you could please state your address when you come up to the podium. Good morning.
Good morning. Blake Lister, 1702 East Bell Road in Phoenix. Thank you, Chairman Gates and supervisors. My name is Blake Lister. I have been a resident of this state for over 2 decades, and I am a voter who has voted in every single election that I've had a chance to since I've turned 18 in this county. With that, I'm obviously also an American citizen, and as an American citizen, I'm a supporter of our Constitution and the process for our republic our founders set out for us over 2 centuries ago. That we are a republic made up of representatives chosen by we the people through our critical democratic process. With that, I would like to say thank you to our supervisors, Recorder Richer, and for all election officials for their work in this work in their election, upholding that democratic process. For processing the election results, for making sure that our elections are safe and secure, and for ensuring that every single legal vote was counted. While being faced with threats, including
excuse me, if we could please allow this gentleman to speak without interruption. Thank you.
Thank you. While being faced with threats, including threats on your life, Mr. Gates, this board, the recorder, and county employees, many of them temporary, work tirelessly long 16-plus hour days to count every vote in a manner as timely as possible, and I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate those efforts. Thank you, and I yield any time remaining.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. So at that time, again, all right, so that now completes public comment. So the next portion, again, please, well, I want to, okay, okay, all right, so we can continue this meeting and we can have a presentation from our co-directors of election. If we can please maintain decorum, but if we have, you know, all these outbursts, we're not gonna have an opportunity to hear from them. But if people would like to leave right now, we can give folks a couple minutes to do that so you're not leaving during the middle of their presentations. To those of you who are leaving right now, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming down on a Monday to testify. We appreciate. Also appreciate those who are poll workers for the work that you did for our county and for the voters of Maricopa County. So we'll give you just a couple minutes to leave the auditorium if you choose to do so, and then we'll move into presentation by the co-directors of elections.
2 minutes.
Chairman Gates.
We are in a recess to allow people to leave, and the next part of this meeting is going to be presentation by the co-directors of elections answering many of the questions that were raised, and I'm sure that my colleagues and I will have questions as well.
Is there a county attorney here to answer my question? This guy right there, the one that already said there was fraud, the one that you said was fraud, we already saw fraud. Remember that, the November 8th.
All right, so this is an open. This is an open meeting right now, and when we just had public comment for hours where people had the opportunity to speak, and it was heard by those here in the auditorium and also those who are watching at home. Now it's time for a presentation from our co-directors of elections, and I would like to welcome our co-director of elections for voter registration, early voting, Ray Valenzuela, who reports directly to the recorder, Stephen Richer. And then we also have with us Scott Jarrett, who's the director for election day and emergency voting, and works closely with both the recorder and the Board of Supervisors, but is a direct report to the Board of Supervisors. So with that, thank you again for those folks who are leaving right now. We appreciate you joining us. And I will turn it to Mr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and we thank you and really appreciate your time today. I also want to thank all the voters that came and provided us feedback on Maricopa County's administration of elections. Our presentation is formatted to answer many of the questions and concerns that we heard today. And then there's a few that weren't covered in here, and we'll work those into the presentation as best we can. So first to start, just some overall stats. So the number of ballots and envelopes that we had requested for in this 2022 midterm election, we had over 1.87 million ballots requested from early voters. We had 1.3 million of those returned. We also had over 12,900 ballot styles, and that is actually a really key stat. And we're talking about being able to provide a vote center model, being able to provide any one of those ballot styles at our voting locations. And I a lot of times get questions about, well, why is that number so high. And when you think about all the different precincts that we have in Maricopa County, and then we have different special districts, school districts, splitting those precincts, we get to about 2,000 different ballot styles when we talk about the Fed-only ballots and also the nonpartisan ballots. And then once you add the Spanish ballot, which is a requirement of Maricopa County to be able to provide that to both English-speaking and Spanish-speaking voters. We get up to about 4,300 ballot styles, and then we implement a election day only ballot style, a early ballot style, and a provisional ballot style. And the reason we do that is to provide additional security in our voting locations so we don't have double voting occurring, and that gets us to about 12,900 ballot styles. A few other items. We had a very robust in-person voting option for voters. We first had a phased-in opening approach. So at 27 days, we had 12 voting locations open and available for voters. About 2 weeks before the election, we had 56 voting locations open and available for voters. The day before Election Day, we had 128 vote centers open and available. And then on Election Day, we had 223. And all of these are really much the most options we've ever provided before in Maricopa County. And then as far as, we heard from some of our poll workers today, we had bipartisan representation throughout the entire process, whether that it was from our poll workers or the political party observers that came to observe our processes. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight, and we'll have more of these details throughout the presentation, but we had 64.2% of Maricopa County voters participate in this election, which is a near record turnout, or at least as far as historical averages is concerned. So first question or claim concern is voter suppression and voter disenfranchisement. Thousands left waiting at the polls who were not allowed to vote. And when you talk about disenfranchisement, you have to look at this in one is at the individual level and the other is at a macro level. And we'll talk about the individual and some of the issues that occurred with our printers, and we did have some issues with our printers, as well as some of the long lines that occurred on Election Day. But when you look at a macro level, one of the things that you can do is look at actual data. And what the data shows is, and I mentioned it just on the last slide, we had 64.2% of voters participate in this election. And this chart up here, it has, goes back all the way to 1982, 4 decades of voting in midterm elections. And if you look at, there's 3 red bar charts here. Those are the years in which that midterm election exceeded 64%. And there's only 3 of them in the last 40 years. One of them was in 1982. Another was in 2018, and then another was this midterm election in 2022. And I also wanted to point out, when you look at Maricopa County's turnout as it compares to other state, or the rest of the counties throughout the state. So we had 64.2% turnout, but the rest of the state had 60% turnout. So we exceeded the turnout when you compare us to other counties throughout the state. And then I wanted to also just look at the average turnout for elections. So if you go back to the 70s, it's about 56.3% turnout. So in 2022, we exceeded that by about 8 percentage points. But that's just not trying to take in lots of years that occurred early on and try to bring that percentage down. If you just look at the last 3 midterm elections, 2010, 2014, 2018, the average turnout is actually 54.7%. So in this election, we actually nearly beat that by 10 percentage points. And then on the last item, I just wanted to highlight turnout based on political party, so in 2022, compared to 2018. So if you look at Republican turnout in 2022, it was 75.4% of Republicans turned out and were able to participate in the vote. That's actually an increase over 2018's, which was one of the highest voter turnouts in recent times. So they were at 74.2%, so over a 1% increase over 2018. But when you look at Democratic turnout in 2022, it was 69.9%. And in 2018, it was Stronghold District did the machines and lines not work and were too long. So just a reminder about the voting model that we provided to voters in Maricopa County, right? It was one of the most options that voters had to participate. Mr. Valenzuela highlighted many of the early ballot options or the voting through mail. We had 52% of our voters return a ballot through mail, but the other 48% visited one of our voting locations. That was maybe one of those early voting locations that opened 27 days before the election. We had 12 in 2022. We only had 7 of those locations open in 2020. When we got to 2 weeks before the election, we had 56 of those voting locations open and available. That was an increase of 15 over 2020. Once we got to election day, we had 223 vote centers available. Any voter could go to any one of those vote centers on election day. That was an increase above from 175 that we had in 2020. We also had 12 standalone drop boxes. Those were either in city or town clerk's offices or outside of our Maricopa County Elections Department or our drop box in Mesa as well. So those voters could return that early ballot affidavit, drop it in that drop box. We work to make sure that our voting locations are accessible. So they, on average, are fewer than 2 miles apart. And that's actually looking at the entire county, all the way out to Gila Bend and Aguila. So in the more urban and populated areas of Maricopa County, it's much closer, about, on average, 1 mile distance between each vote center. We also had, because we had more voting locations, it meant we had more check-in stations and more voting booths for voters to be able to participate, the most ever in Maricopa County's history. One thing that we strive for is being able to give voters as much information as they can so they can make decisions of how they want to participate. And one of those is making sure that we're capturing wait times from our voting locations. Our poll workers tell us this. They enter it in throughout the day. So, and we do this not only on election day, but we also do it during the early voting period. So we had over 44,000 voters participate in person during either early voting or emergency voting. And voters waited on average less than 1 minute to be able to vote during that early voting period. When we transitioned to election day, on average, it was about 6 minutes per voter. But if you factor in those 290,000 voters that dropped off their early ballot, it really gets down to an average of about 3 minutes per voter on election day waiting in line. Now, there were some voting locations that had much longer wait times. And we've gone through and done the analysis on those as well. And I wanted to just highlight some as we approach.
Supervisor Galvin.
Mr. Jarrett, I have a question for you. For folks who've never, let's say, even been to a voting center because they've always voted by mail, so the process of the people who drop off their ballot on election day, do they go in a separate line than the people who are going to actually vote on election day?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Galvin, yes. So a voter that has a green affidavit envelope, they actually don't need to stand in line at all. They can skip the line entirely and go straight to the ballot drop box, which is in the voting location.
And the ballot drop box is manned by someone? There's a person there monitoring it when they drop off the ballot?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Galvin, so we have upwards of 10 to 12 poll workers in every one of our voting locations. We have our marshal manning the tabulation equipment and the ballot box that those live ballots are going into. The ballot box where those early ballots, it is a big, secure blue box, has tamper-evident seals, is locked. And those voters, as they walk out of the voting location, it's inside, can drop their ballot right into that. Again, that's a ballot that's in a green affidavit envelope, that's sealed, that's signed, that's gonna need to go through signature verification still, that gets dropped into that drop box.
Thank you.
And one other item, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Galvin, you mentioned the different lines. So the reason why a voter has to stand in line at a voting location to get an actual live ballot is because they're gonna check in at our site book. And that was actually mentioned that they are actually connected to the internet. This is separate and apart from our tabulation equipment. So for us to be able to provide a vote center model and confirm that a voter hasn't already voted, we need a live connection, what we established through our MoFi connection. It's a virtual private network, secure, back to the recorder's voter registration system so we can verify they haven't already returned their early ballot or they haven't voted at another vote center. So we can confirm that before we issue them a live ballot, the thing can be tabulated on site. And then I mentioned the MoFi, the virtual private network. One of the things we had one of our poll workers mention in the Dicer Community Center, right? There was an issue at the beginning of the day. It was actually one of our MoFis had failed during the early voting period. Once we got that, our technicians went outside, replaced that MoFi to get that voting location up and running and serving voters.
So just to clarify on that point then, you're saying that none of the vote totals are transferred via the internet?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. It's just the number of check-ins, the number of voters that checked in at the voting location.
Okay, thank you.
So back
to Vice Chair Hickman.
Yeah, as I'm prone to do, as you know, in most meetings, I was wondering if I could ask Amy and her crew. We're about the mid part of this canvas. Would you let me know how many viewers, if you can, during this part where we're trying to answer questions? I would appreciate knowing what that is. At your leisure. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hickman. Mr. Jarrett.
Mr. Chairman, so talking about election day in those wait times of 3 to 6 minutes, we heard several reports of some of our voting locations having longer wait times as we progressed through the day. And I took another analysis at both the 5 p.m. and the 6 p.m. hour. So when I went through and reviewed, we had 188 locations during that 5 p.m. hour that were 30 minutes or less. 143 of those were 10 minutes or less. All of this information was available on our website, locations.maricopa.vote. It was a highly publicized website. We talked about it throughout all of our press conferences leading up to Election Day. It was included in the sample ballot that was mailed to voters. Any voter that had not requested a ballot, they could get their information, where their closest voting location was, how to check and review wait times. During the 6 p.m. hour, we had 180 locations with wait times of less than 30 minutes. 126 of those had wait times of less than 10 minutes during that last hour of in-person voting. So, but I did want to highlight, we not only had lines to check in at our voting locations, and as I'll describe, because of some of the issues we had with our printers, because of some of the issues and the fact that some voters were scared to put their ballot into the ballot box, which has been referred to as door number 3, we had lines at our tabulators as well. At one of our locations in the North Valley, we had after 7 p.m. on election night, we had 150 voters in line at that tabulator, or one of the 2 tabulators, trying to feed their ballots in. We made sure that we served every single one of those voters. Those voters were able to feed that ballot in as many times as they wanted. We teach our poll workers to respond with empathy and try to put themselves in the shoes of the voter. So they worked with those voters, let them feed that ballot in as many times as they want. If they wanted to check back into a site book and get a new ballot issued, they could do that, would spoil that first one, or they could drop it in to door number 3. But we let every one of those voters spend as much time as they wanted in front of that tabulator and inserting that ballot as many times as they wanted. And we'll talk about a little bit more of the causes in the upcoming sections. So the next claim or concern.
But real quickly, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Supervisor Gallardo.
So I hear it clear, because I've heard quite a few people come and testify. They had an option, every voter had an option to put their ballot into the ballot box. They had that option. No one was told you can't put it in the ballot box. They were instructed to put it in the ballot box.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gardo, and you're stealing a little bit of my thunder later on in the presentation, but that question is yes. Every voter had that opportunity to be able to put their ballot in that ballot box, and this is a decades-long practice that we've used since 1996 because Maricopa County recognizes that there can be issues with tabulation equipment. There can be issues with printers. That is commonplace in elections throughout the entire country, and we need that redundant process to be able to offer that to voters. So the next claim or concern. Funny how all of the printer and tabulator problems occurred in predominantly Republican districts. How many voters were disenfranchised because they were told to leave because you screwed up the election process? So this on this slide is a heat map of where we have all of our different voting locations that we used in the general election. And one of the items that we're doing right now is we're doing an analysis, a root cause analysis to get to the bottom of exactly what the issues were that occurred on election day. And we've not completed that analysis at this point in time, but we did release a report and prepared it throughout the weekend and sent it to the Attorney General's office. And one of the things that we've identified so far is it was a problem with, well, we offer two different types of printers in our voting locations, ballot on demand printers. One is the Lexmark 4150. It's actually our newer version of the ballot on demand printer. We purchased it in 2021. And another is our Oki, which we purchased many of these in 2020, or we had some existing Oki printers that were used just to print control slips that we retrofitted in 2020. So we've used that Oki model since the 2020 elections and the August primary 2020. So the next claim I'll cover is do not put your ballot in box 3 to be tabulated downtown. Maricopa County is not turning on the tabulators downtown today. Make sure you put your ballot into the tabulator yourself and that your ballot is accepted. Do not push the green button as it puts your ballot into box 3. So first, the secure ballot box. So I want to describe what box 3 or door number 3 is. It's essentially a big blue box that's secured with tamper evident seals and it's locked. And atop it sits a vote center tabulator. So if a ballot is run through the vote center tabulator, it'll drop into the back of that box, and them ballots will sit in there loosely in that back of the box. Inside that ballot box, there's a divider that separates the ballots that went through the tabulator and the ballots that then go into what we call door number 3, or where the misread ballots will go. This has been a practice that Maricopa County has used since 1996 when we first implemented on-site tabulation at our voting locations. The reason we implemented it is because we recognize, just like every voting jurisdiction in the country, there can be an issue that would prevent a voter from being able to tabulate their ballot on site. And we don't want to expect and require that voter to wait and hold that ballot for a couple hours. So that's why we've had that practice, a decades-long practice. And in fact, this is a very, very common practice. So we have in the state of Arizona 8 counties that is the only option voters are provided. They don't have any on-site tabulation. Those voters drop that ballot in to that drop box, very similar to our door number 3. Every single voter that votes on election day, and then those ballots then come back to central count. But it's not only those 8 counties. The other 7 all have a very similar process to Maricopa County, that if a tabulator on site is not working, those voters would have to put that ballot into a secure container to be transported back from that voting location to the elections department. So, but as we went through and progressed through election day, and we heard some of that testimony provided today from some members of the community and members in our audience, that voters were scared to put their ballot into box number 3. And why is that? Well, we've just gone through 2 years of disinformation, discrediting the Maricopa County Elections Department, eroding voter confidence in our processes. So when we told our poll workers immediately, we got that 620 call, we reminded them, remember your training, guide voters to put that ballot into the door number 3 or that secure ballot box. They immediately started getting pushback from voters. And it's because we had highly influential members of the public telling voters not to put their ballots, creating fear, creating fear in those voters to be able to put that in knowing that it's going to be securely transported, which it was on election night. Every single one of those ballots ended up being counted at the elections department. So when you think about it, and I tried to think of sort of what was an analogy that every sort of person could sort of relate to. And one of those analogies is, all right, you're driving down the road and you get a flat tire, right? What's the backup plan or redundancy to having a flat tire? Well, you have a spare in your car. Well, if that person, that driver, is unwilling to put that spare on their car because they've been convinced that it's not going to be secure, that doesn't leave that driver very many options, right? So essentially that's what happened to us. The elections department was sort of handcuffed in our backup plan to be able to serve these voters and have those voters, just like we've done in every single election for the last several decades, when there's an issue, to be able to drop that ballot into secure box number 3.
And Mr. Chairman, just real brief, I mean, it's this type of false information that just drives me crazy. It really does. We see it over and over and over again. And I mean, you didn't put who tweeted it, and I'm not going to ask you, but I think we all know this is the type of stuff that it continues to hurt voters. It really does. Instead of listening to the experts, they're listening to false, unfounded claims, statements, and this is a perfect example of just one.
And Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Garter, not only were we reminding our poll workers of this process, we, the elections department, you yourself, Mr. Chairman, and the recorder were early on out there communicating with voters on what they can do, why we work to resolve this issue. It's part of our redundancy, very clear on what a voter can do to be able to put that ballot into the secure drop box through that door number 3. And then just wanted to highlight, so we had, so every ballot that went into door number 3, every election day ballot that went into door number 3 was counted, 100% of those. And there were 16,724 total ballots that were dropped off, election day ballots dropped off into door number 3. That represents 1% of the total number of ballots cast in this last election. And then we had 206 total voters go to 2 different locations. I already mentioned 84 of those. 84 checked out at their first location and went and voted at their second and were issued a standard ballot. We had another 122 that voted at their first location, did not check out, went to their second location and voted a provisional ballot. So we went through the elections department, did the analysis, and identified that out of those 122, 109 of those ballots could count. Why could we count those? Because we confirmed at their first location there was an issue with one of the printers that occurred at the time when they were checking in at that first location, and we identified a variance in the number of check-ins with the number of ballots cast on election day at that voting location. So if we identified those 2 items and they went to and cast a provisional ballot at that second voting location, we were able to count that. So out of the 206, 193 of those voters had their ballots counted and legally counted. The other voters that did not, we cannot confirm that there was an issue at that first location or that there was a variance. So it was likely their first ballot had been counted at that first location.
So just to underline this again, this was unfortunate. I mean, I was at multiple press conferences where I personally apologized on behalf of the board for what happened and these challenges that occurred on election day. But I think this slide is so important for people to understand that there were redundancies in the system. For example, the ballot box that people could put their ballot in, that's known as door 3, has been around since 1996. Your workers were trained on it, and we have a list right here. 16,724 of those ballots were counted. Those people were not disenfranchised. And also for those people who chose to go to a different location, you've talked about how many of those who were not checked out and then went and voted at another vote center, most of them, those votes were counted based upon research that was done. And then finally, there were a total of 223 vote centers. So it wasn't like in the old days when we're precinct-based, and if your precinct is down, you're out of luck. There was one of many other, again, a total of 223 vote centers around the county. Very unfortunate. This board is committed that this never happens again. We're going to bring in the expertise. You're already looking at it to make sure that it doesn't happen. But there were redundancies in place that people took advantage of on Election Day.
Mr. Chairman?
Vice Chair Hickman.
So explain, I'm just trying to think this through for everyone because there's a lot of people, I'm becoming a
God bless this room. God bless your soul. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, oh, God.
All right, so thank you for your comments. Vice Chair Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Make some comments too. You guys are a bunch of political hacks. That's what you are.
All right.
You should be ashamed of yourselves. All of you should be ashamed of yourself. And you, Richard, you should be ashamed of yourself too. Political.
You may not be able to hear what's going on here, but we're having someone leaving the auditorium here. I do apologize, and I will turn it to Vice Chair
Make sure you watch yourself on
Hickman.
TV with that performance. It should be great. Okay, meanwhile, I was wondering I know that what we do is you put the ballots in and it goes into either a ballot box or a
a ballot box, but a separate segregated portion of that ballot box.
But the ones that are tabulated go into
the back portion of that ballot
box. And that vote or that ballot is used to aggregate. Take me through this, and does this speed the vote a little bit? Because I hear so many times people say, we're going to make it. Republicans, Democrats, everybody, the governor, easy to vote, hard to cheat. Okay? So easy to vote. It looks like we are offering up where very few counties have this offering, right? So tell me what happens to the digital card, how it gets to the main tabulator. Take me through that, because I keep going back to the smaller counties or some of the counties that only offer the option of a door 3 ballot box option. So tell us what happens with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Hickman. So all of our vote center tabulators, they first go through a logic and accuracy test to make sure that they're going to be accurately be able to tabulate those ballots that we've programmed for this election. After that logic and accuracy test, we seal 2 memory cards within that tabulator. Okay. They're under a tamper evidence seal. We send out 2, and I believe I have another prop here, find the precinct ballot report, but we send out to the voting location, to the inspector, something called a precinct ballot report. On that precinct ballot report, let's see, maybe it's, this document. It has all the seal numbers that were affixed when the elections department placed in those tabulators and secured those doors. The poll workers are asked, before they open the voting location, verify that those tamper evidence seals are still affixed. Those memory cards have not been removed. Then they open the polls on election morning. They verify that no ballots have been counted on those tabulators. As voters go through the day and they tabulate ballots, then at the end of the day, they're gonna have to close those polls. So they're gonna run when they open polls, they ran a tally receipt called a 0 report. When they close, they run another tally receipt showing all the votes that were counted and run through the tabulator that day. They run a second one of those. So the first one that they printed goes in a black canvas bag. Bear with me, I brought props. One of these black canvas bags, along with the ballots that went into the ballot box, the segregated from the ballot box that went into the misread envelopes. These are going to be affixed with a tamper evidence seal with that tally receipt inside. The poll workers are going to then break one of those tamper evidence seals at closing. It's actually going to read void on it when they break it. They're going to remove that memory card and place it into a bubble pack. And that bubble pack is then going to be affixed with a tamper evidence seal. And that bubble pack with the memory cards inside, one for each tabulator, along with the ballots and all required forms, are going to be brought back by bipartisan teams from that voting location to a receiving site. That receiving site's going to have 2 members of different parties, along with our truck drivers, along with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, providing security over that receiving site, bringing all of those materials from all the different voting locations to the elections department. And what those memory cards allow us to do is on election night, we can read those in and get results posted. We don't have to then go to the black canvas bags with the ballots, break these seals, and then run those ballots through the tabulators. They're already on site. So yes, it does provide a much faster process for us to be able to report results. But it's still a very secure process built with redundancy after redundancy after redundancy. Not only do we have a backup memory card still on site with that precinct-based tabulator, we have the first memory card that's going to be read in on election night, but then we have the ballots themselves in this black canvas bag. And these are the types of tamper-evident seals that are affixed to the black canvas bag. They have little barcodes on here that as they go through every step of the process, we're scanning them in to say, okay, custody's been transferred to this person at this point in time. Custody's been transferred once it gets to McTech.
And the public the truth when it comes to conducting election. And here's a perfect example. This is the truth.
And to move this along, and again, we're going to give everyone the opportunity to speak who's filled out a form. We ask no.
Totals at approximately 2,435,000. Prior to the 2020 general voting list, approximately 87% of Democrats, approximately and capturing an image of the signature on the ballot packet such that it could be signature verified. At 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning, we began signature verification on the approximately 290,000 election day drop-offs. We did not compromise the process because it's important